Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit about my graphic organizer assignment. I took advantage of the cross-curricular nature of social studies and ELA as an aspiring English teacher, and I devised this lesson that would have to do with the text of Mice and Men and understanding some background context, historical context about migrant workers in the 1930s, the Depression era. So essentially, the lesson format would be the whole class would watch I believe it was 7-minute documentary that I'd found on migrant workers in the Depression era. And that covered information about the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, specific information about the conditions that they were faced with as they traveled. And then as a whole class, we would watch that. And then there were 2 articles that I found from Common Lit, I believe it was, that I would distribute out to the class. And then students would be partnered off and tasked with completing this graphic organizer with the information. So I formatted it in this way to, first of all, I included bullet points for everything to ensure that they knew that it didn't have to be written in a formal full sentence way. I wanted it to be chunked up information for them to be able to remember and just keep in mind as we move forward with Of Mice and Men to understand the context of the characters and what life was like for migrant workers at that time. I specifically provided only smallish boxes because there's quite frankly quite a bit of information that could be included in it. But to just assure students that they didn't have to include everything, I formatted it in this way. So moving forward with the graphic organizer, specifically, they're going to investigate what is a migrant worker, what was the most common type of work for a migrant worker in the 1930s, because there can be various industries that migrant workers are involved in, but specifically we're looking at farmers and agriculture workers. They are going to investigate some of the reasons for labor migration. And for this box, I pre-filled into specific areas that I want to make sure that they get the information from that. One is about the Dust Bowl, which has to do with the land, and the impact of the Great Depression, which is more reasons having to do with the economy. And then I included the 2 bullet points so they know to fill in 2 specific information that is pointed out in the articles. And then they will have to fill in what challenges the migrant workers faced. And then specifically, I included a vocabulary term here that I want them to be familiar with, which is who was an Okie and how are they treated. So all of these prompts are directly aligned with the learning objectives, which is students will be able to define migrant worker, understand the reasons for labor migration in the 1930s, and the challenges the migrant workers faced. And that learning objective is directly aligned with the social studies standard that I had chosen for this, which is written here, describe the impact of continuity and change throughout US history, specifically about physical geography, labor and industry, and commerce. So I'll just move forward to my filled out chart. I filled out chunked up information and I wrote it in a way that would be reflective of my students, which this is for a 8th or 9th grade because they share standards classroom. So basically all the information here is appropriate for what I would expect the students to be able to pull out of the articles and from the documentary. So at the end of the class period, this would be submitted for assessment. And I would be able to continue with my instruction to make sure that they have a good baseline knowledge of migrant workers as we continue to read the text of Mice and Men. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy.